This is 2.6, solving equations using multiplication or division. And there are two things we need to know before we start. Now we've already solved equations using addition or subtraction. And basically what we had to do is we had to look and see what was being done to the variable. In other words, what the number was with the variable. We looked at the sign of that number and we decided how to make it equal to 0. So we did the opposite of the sign, and this basically is the same thing. We're going to use the same method in solving these, except we're using division and multiplication. But let's read this. The division property of equality: dividing each side of an equation by the same non-zero number produces an equivalent equation. In other words, if I have, let's see, 2x equals 2, I divide both sides by the same number, I'm going to get an equation that is equivalent. Okay? Let's read the multiplication property of equality. Multiplying each side of an equation by the same non-zero number produces an equivalent equation. Again, if I have something like x over 2 equals 2, and I multiply both sides by 2, I get the same equation, which is x equals 4. I get an equivalent equation. Okay, so we're going to use those two properties today to help us solve problems involving multiplication and division equations here. So let's look at this one. Now I have to look at the number with the x, okay, and I have to look at the operation. The operation between the 2 and the x, well, that's multiplication. So if you want to solve an equation, you need to do the opposite. So we need to kind of undo what has been done. So what is being done to the x? Well, it's multiplication. So to undo that, I use division. Okay, so I'm dividing both sides because that's what the division property of equality says. Right here. And so if I divide both sides by 2, well, the 2's become 1. 2 over 2 is 1, so I get 1x, or just x, equals 9. And I'm finished. One step, and I've solved the equation. Let's look at this one. This is negative 5 times y. Well, the opposite of multiplying by negative 5 would be dividing by negative 5. And if I do the same thing on both sides, this becomes 1. So it's 1y, which is what we want. Y equals, and I got negative 60 divided by negative 5. That is a positive 12. And I kind of like to write it with the variable on the left-hand side. So that's the way I do that. Okay. One more thing. What's going on between the negative 6 and the x? Well, it's multiplication. I do the opposite, which is division. Divide both sides by negative 6. That becomes 1. 1x equals, well, negative 6 into 48 goes negative 8 times. Okay, let's look at the next one. Solve equations using multiplication. Okay, so what we have here between the x and the 2 is division. The opposite of division is multiplication. So what we're going to do is take the number that is being divided into x and multiply by it. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 to undo this division by 2. Okay, remember when we're multiplying by a whole number, it's really 2 over 1. So if I've got a 2 on top here and a 2 on bottom here, they cancel out, right? So I get 1x, which is what I want, or just x. I never put the 1x. 2 times 13 is 26, so x equals 26, and we are finished with that one. Look at the next one. I've got y divided by 8. Well, the opposite of division by 8 is multiplication by 8. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 8, and I'm using the dot, and in this case it's okay to do that. The 8's will cancel and become 1. 8 over 8 is 1, so I get y equals, well, negative 8 times 8 is negative 64. Okay, and I like putting the variable on the left-hand side. Again, I've got w divided by 7. The opposite of division by 7 is multiplication by 7. Okay, 7 times 9 is 63. The 7's cancel. I get w over here, and I like writing w on the left-hand side. Okay, let's look at the next page. Let's look at this first one. Well, this is multiplication, so I do the opposite, which is division. And I have to include the negative because that's part of the problem. Okay, and if I divide 0 by negative 15, well, that's pretty easy. These 15's become 1. I get x equals 0 divided by negative 15 is 0. Okay, here, this is multiplication. Divide by 3 on both sides. Okay, the 3's cancel. It becomes x equals, well, 3 in the 78, negative 78. It's going to be a negative. Okay, and that's 226, right? I like writing the variable on the left-hand side, so it's x equals negative 26. Let's do one more of these, and we'll do a couple of division problems and be done with these. Okay, I've got a negative y equals 17. I want to know what positive y equals. Okay, so if I multiply both sides by negative 1, doesn't that change the sign of the y to positive y? Because negative 1 times negative y becomes positive y. And negative 1 times 17 is negative 17. And this is my answer. Y is equal to negative 17. Okay. Let's look at this. This is x divided by 14, so the opposite of division by 14, I don't have a lot of room here, is multiplication by 14. Okay, the 14's cancel. X equals, well, 5 times 14 is 70, so I get x equals 70 here. Okay, let's look at this last one here. X divided by 50, the opposite of division by 50 is multiplication by 50. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 50. The 50's cancel. I get x equals, well, negative 7 times 50 is negative 350. Like writing the variable on the left-hand side, so it's x equals negative 350. And circle it. Let's look at a word problem when we're done. Wade purchased 3 videos. That's probably important. And 1 music CD. That's probably important. The CD cost Wade $12.99. That's probably important. Okay, if he paid the same amount for each video, now when you see the word each, you're thinking that's a rate. Anytime we have to spend the same amount of money over and over again, it's a rate. Okay, and rates are always multiplied by something. And spend a total of $42.96. We always want to know what the total is. How much did each video cost? Now the question is always a variable. We don't know how much each video costs, so we give it a variable, which is x. Okay, now when we set up an equation, we put the total on one side, and the total is $42.96. Now everything on this side has to add up to equal this total. Okay, so 1 music CD is $12.99. That's going to go towards our total. So we're going to add that. Okay, and if I paid for 3 videos and they each cost x, well, how do I write that? Well, it's a rate, so it's 3 times x. And I've just set up a very simple equation from a word problem. Okay, now all I would do is, now we're not going to solve this because we haven't gotten the 2-step equations. So the main thing is setting it up. And so this is what it looks like. Again, the total's here. A one-time fee or one-time payment is here that's added. And then our rate multiplied by whatever our variable was in this case. It represented how much each video cost. Okay, and that's how you set up a basic word problem.